When we bought our new to us Island Packet 35, one of the first jobs was to repair the anchor windlass. The old quick Antares was in poor shape. The gearbox had corroded so badly that the weight of the motor had caused it to fracture. Further investigation showed a number of other issues. In the Island Packet, the windlass is mounted so far forward in the anchor locker that access to the two forwardmost mounting studs is nigh on impossible. We discovered that the nuts on these studs were only engaged for a few of the threads. It was extremely difficult to get even a short spanner on the nuts, but eventually they came off. The chances of getting anything like a decent mounting looked impossible, so I set about re-engineering the gearbox and windlass so they could be installed and secured from above decks. The first job was to replace the gearbox and refurbish the motor. Cambridge Rewinds did a great job of this at a very reasonable cost. Whilst the motor was apart, we spotted that the original design only secured the motor to the gearbox with 2 bolts. Given the weight of the motor and the high torque levels, I decided to drill and tap a further 2 holes into the motor casing, which would match up with the 2 other holes already in the gearbox casting. I also saw that the plastic casing fitted around the motor intruded between the flange on the motor and the matching recess in the gearbox. This was preventing a firm joint between the motor and gearbox. After weighing up the options, I decided to do away with the plastic casing completely and look at other ways of keeping the water away from the motor. Next, I needed to make some captive nuts that could be secured to the gearbox. Some phosphor bronze bar was procured from eBay and turned down into discs 25mm in diameter. Each of these had an 8mm groove machined into the circumference to help keep a Jubilee clip in place. The finished discs then had a segment cut out and filed so that they fitted into the available space on the gearbox, and were then clamped in place using a large diameter Jubilee clip. For the above decks part, the windlass base originally had 4 8mm studs engaged into threaded bosses on the underside. I drilled through these bosses and then countersunk the top face so that I could fit 4 countersunk screws from above. The base was offered up to the gearbox, and with the output shaft keeping everything in line, and the captive nuts could then be marked for drilling. I put a generous countersink before tapping the holes, as I wanted the screws to be able to self-align. To get the motor and gearbox back into position, a rope was passed through the hole for the gearbox output shaft, down through the hole in the deck, and attached to a temporary metal loop on the output shaft so I could lift the combination into position. To get the holes to align above and below deck, I made up 4 temporary M8 studs of 8 inch, 9 inch, 10 and 11 inches. These were fitted into the captive nuts to help guide the motor and gearbox combination into the correct location. The different lengths allowed an assistant below decks to manipulate them into the appropriate hole one at a time as I slowly lifted the gearbox with the rope. Once all the temporary studs were showing through, I used nuts and washers to gradually work the whole assembly into its final position. Once I was happy with this, I then removed the temporary studs one at a time, marking their length as I did so. I then cut a suitable M8 countersunk Allen bolt to that length to replace the temporary stud. We've had this arrangement in place for 18 months now. It's been working well and there's no sign of slacking off, and it's recovered quite a number of well dug in anchors.